If you just came in, the QR code is download for the presentation. If you're interested in the presentation, if you get it and it sucked, you can just delete it. So there you go. So I'm Joe Cicero. I'm a senior security engineer, and my presentation is Dragons Can Fly. A little bit about me. I'm currently a senior security engineer. I've been doing that for about 5 years, so relatively new and for a lot of you. In the past, I've been an instructor. I was an instructor for about 18 years. During that time, I was a forensic examiner, a columnist. Prior to that, I was a network administrator. I've been a programmer, technician. I worked on the help desk. And then when I got out of high school, I joined the Marines. Any other Marines in here? Nobody? Oh, all right. I'm alone. If you're interested in my full profile, you can visit me on LinkedIn. That www.joecicero.com will bring you to my LinkedIn page. All right, my goal for this presentation is first to be entertaining. I want to tell stories about what I'm seeing and what I found and what's happened to me. I find that that's more entertaining, and you probably remember it better than you remember somebody going through lots of slides with data. Maybe you'll learn something. So if I set my expectation low, I'll probably meet them. All right, a little bit about the title. So I started out as an instructor, and as an instructor, you would want to associate the learner's knowledge with the subject matter being taught. So one of the things when I was discussing defense in depth, I would bring up, medieval castles and the protections. You're probably already aware of some like moats. Here's a moat. Everybody knows what a moat is. Or a drawbridge. Most people can look at that and say, yep, I understand what a drawbridge is. And then, there are towers. We know what a tower is. But there are also things like a machicolation. Does anyone know what a machicolation is for? This is like your new IT product. All right, so a machicolation was built so that the guy who's on top of the castle dropping rocks and hot burning oil onto the attackers doesn't get shot with an arrow. And that's important, right? Because every time they defended the castle, they learned something. Like, yeah, poor Bob was up on top of the castle and he was defending, dropping the rocks and the oil, and he got shot by an arrow. So maybe we ought to do something about that. So they built that thing called a machicolation. This security approach allowed for one or more layers to be compromised without the castle being breached. But dragons can fly. Meaning dragons don't care about all those security measures that you have. They're just going to go fly right on by them, and they're going to breach the castle. So in this presentation, I want to look at the layers of IT security, how malicious actors are compromising or circumventing them, and discuss what defenders can do to get ahead of the attack. All right. To start, I'm in healthcare. The number one cyber threat in healthcare for the past 2 or 3 years, and according to this, in 2023 is going to be phishing. So if phishing is the number one attack vector, then we want to look at all of the layers of security that we have for a phishing attack, or we're missing out on a lot of things. How many of you are worried about ransomware? So royal actors gaining initial access to victim networks in a number of ways. The number one way that ransomware is deployed in an organization is phishing. So if you're in, I know finance is the number one attack vector is phishing, and I'm sure most of you, whatever organization you work for, the number one attack vector is probably phishing. So we want to look, I definitely want to take time today looking at the security layers of phishing and how malicious actors are getting past those. I want to talk about the definition of phishing. Now, you're all groaning now. Oh my God, the definition of phishing, you got to be kidding me. If you ask a normal person what is phishing, they're going to tell you what's an email. All right, but I go with the IBM definition here. The IBM definition is phishing attacks are fraudulent emails, text messages, you might call them smishing, phone calls, you might call that social engineering, websites designed to manipulate people into downloading malware, sharing sensitive information, or taking other actions that expose themselves to their organization to cybercrime. So I'm not looping phishing into just an email message. I'm saying it's a lot more than that, and we have to have security measures for all of those things. All right, the layers of security that I want to cover today, I want to talk about user education. I've learned a bunch of lessons there. Email security filtering, why some of that stuff fails. Web security filtering, why some of that stuff fails. Our firewalls. And then I was going to do some stuff on anti-malware and EDR. I think I have 2 slides, but there was already an EDR presentation, so I've removed a lot of that from my presentation, save you having to look at that. All right, we're going to get started. You can compromise some of the security layers all of the time, and all of the security layers some of the time. When you compromise all of the security layers at the same time, you have a breach, and that's what we're trying to avoid. We don't want to have that breach. All right, let's talk about education. Story time. So I was in education 18 years. Like week 1 at my new employer, they said, we want you to develop some awareness training. Oh, that's awesome. I know about developing training materials. I'll start with a PowerPoint. What I didn't realize is how many people had to read that PowerPoint before it would be authorized. I like to tell my coworkers, this has got to be the most expensive PowerPoint I've ever put together. So I put it together. Well, now my boss has to review it. Now my boss's boss has to review it. Now the marketing team has to review it. It was like amazing. I couldn't believe it. In education, I create a PowerPoint, I use it. So then I want to talk about in education, right? You might have hours to learn something or years to learn something. I got the PowerPoint back and they said it's too long. You get 5 minutes. So I got to train 5,000 employees with a no more than 5-minute presentation. Well, we all know that from a user education standpoint, that's going to fail, which created an entire organization, an entire stream of companies that would do phishing awareness training. Now, more that I learned about phishing awareness training. If you take a look at this image here, it's based on 9.5 million users. That's a big set. That's a data set, 9.5 million users. And basically it says if you do no phishing awareness training, you're going to have a 32% failure rate. And if you do, the first month you do training, you might get that down to 27%. In the second month, get it down to 25%. And if you buy this without understanding what's really going on, you think, oh my God, if I use a product to do phishing awareness training, I can get my 32% down to 5%. But now let's look at something I learned, some reality. You're not going to, if you're in an organization of 5,000 employees, or probably more if you have an organization of 15,000 employees, you're not going to have the same 5,000 employees at the end of 12 months. So if we look at 10% of 5,000, that's 500, half of that is 250, we should have only 250 failures. But if you lose literally only 5% of your employees, that accounts for 50 leaving, that 250 is reduced down to 220. But you're not going to lose 50 employees and not replace them. And if you're in a growth industry, you're going to replace that 50 with 60 or 70 or 80, so it's going to be even worse. But let's go with best case scenario. You replace one for one body. Taking into account 50 new employees per month, that number is actually 820. Let me explain. On month 12, you just hired 50 new people that fail at 32%. You have 50 people that just got hired last month. They fail at 27%. So taking into account all of that, you actually end up with a fail rate of 820 or 16%. I think the reality is probably somewhere between 5 and 16%, maybe 10%. But if you're hoping for that 5% and you're an organization of any size, if you're getting there, you're doing really good. Again, that's phishing awareness training that happens every month. So, based upon that previous screen, we know a decent percentage of our users will fall victim to a phishing attack. There's nothing we can do about that. And so that means we have to look at our technical controls and make sure that our technical controls are the best that they can be. All right, let's talk about email technical controls. So here's a problem. You're probably getting emails from legitimate senders, but those legitimate senders may lose control of their email. We call that a business email compromise or a vendor email compromise or an email account compromise. If it's not a business, it might be a personal email compromise. All those legitimate accounts that have been sending and receiving to your business emails, they look legit, and they're going to look legit to your users, right? I email this person all the time. So that's problematic. Blocking known good senders is going to be difficult. If you have a fix, let me know. So I don't have a fix for blocking known good senders. There's some things you can do, like look at the IP address that this email came from, and maybe it's coming from a foreign country, non-normal IP address, but for the most part, it looks pretty normal to your secure email gateway. Which brings in the threat in the email. You're going to have legitimate emails. Let's look at the threat that are. So what are the threats in an email? Probably links and attachments. Our secure email gateway should be looking at those threats and attachments. So let's take a look at that. Let's talk about links. Legitimate sites as jump-off points. From the beginning of 2020 to June 2022, Palo Alto Networks analyzed URLs detected by their advanced URL filtering service and discovered that the number of phishing URLs hosted on legitimate SaaS platforms continued to increase at an alarming rate. In fact, from June 2021 to June 2022, a rate of newly detected phishing URLs hosted on legitimate SaaS platforms increased over 1,100%. It's going to be hard to block legitimate domain names. Now, the first time it comes through, right, you get nailed, and then hopefully you get that fixed, but you're going to have a hard time blocking things that are legit. For instance, might be something like this. Here's a Google Translate. This is a Google Translate link. So, phishing email contained a Google Translate link. Translate.google is not an illegitimate site. It was not categorized as phishing by the Secure Email Gateway. But the minute you saw that, I don't know, has anybody in here ever gotten a legitimate email that contained a link to Google Translate? Like, yeah. So the minute you see this, you're like, all right, I won't be hit by this again. I want that blocked. All right, so you can get that blocked, but there are others that are harder, like SendGrid. I would love, and I've heard of administrators blocking all of SendGrid. I'm done with it. I don't want to fight them anymore. But if you use SendGrid, it's kind of hard to block everything from SendGrid. Let's look at some other phishing statistics, facts, and figures from 2023. So phishing attacks are at their highest level since 2020. Phishing attacks have risen to a level that we haven't seen since 2016. The Anti-Phishing Working Group Phishing Activity Trends Report for Q3 2022 reported that there were close to 1.3 million phishing sites. Now, if you're like me, you look at that and you say, all right, if they're phishing sites, then they're categorized as phishing sites, and I block phishing sites, so I ought to be good, right? Wrong. There's this huge problem with miscategorized websites. So, take a look at this site on the screen. Anybody categorize that for me? Because this is what I fight with my web filtering, and my web filtering software, your web filtering software, they all suck. So, what is that site? Is that advertising? Is that a park domain? What should that be categorized as? Let me help you. Now there's a domain up there, and I'll zoom in for that. That's called commercybank.com. Is that a bank site? Is that finance and banking? Or is it phishing? Is that a spoof/lookalike domain that should be categorized as phishing? You tell me. I look at that and I say, well, that ought to be phishing. It's not advertising. It's not like, any of those other sites. Shopping. It ought to be categorized as phishing. Now let's take a look at reality. You can't see this. I'll zoom in a little bit. The top two are legitimate commercial banks. Commerce Bank. The top two are categorized as financial services, and they're low risk, and they're authentic. All of the ones below it are spoof/lookalike domains that, get this is going to be important a little bit in my presentation, are categorized as financial services. They're also categorized as low risk. So, if I want to fly by your web filter, now I just have, because this site, which is clearly not Commerce Bank, and is miscategorized as a financial service. Remember that, because we're going to talk about that in a little bit. All right, story time. Half of you in the room are going to have the same story as me. A relative calls you. Joe, I was just on the phone with HP Tech Support, and they remoted into my computer and told me I had malware. And they wanted $100 to fix it. And I got nervous, and I thought I should talk to Joe. There's a good thing. So I hung up the phone, I turned on my computer, and I called you. And I said, okay, back up. What happened? Now this is what she said. I just bought a printer, and I took out the instructions, and the instructions said go to 123.hp.com, which I did. And then I didn't follow the directions on the piece of paper. I just looked at the screen. And I clicked a button, and it asked for my name and my phone number, and I put it in, and they called me, and blah, 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 blah. You know the story. So, doing what I do for a living, I thought, 123, I bet you didn't type 123.hp.com. So I hung up the phone, I did a little research, and I found, yeah, there is a 123hp.com. This is interesting. What does that remind you of? A site we discussed a little bit while ago? So, here's something you have to know. When I did this, I saw what she saw. And when I went to get screenshots, the page showed up differently. That's important for this talk. The second time I visited 123hp.com, I saw an entirely different thing than I saw the first time. Knowing the malicious actor is probably keeping my IP address or my browser agent or some type of data, and they know now I've come here 2 times, let me try to go to that site using something else. So the next screenshots are from my phone, because I knew my phone is going to look different. And sure enough, a site pops up. A normal user, obviously my relative, is not going to see www.geektechies.us and this is an ad, right? They saw a big blue button that said, visit website. So she typed 123hp.com and clicked visit website. And when that happened, this popped up. Hi, this is John Bell from technical support. How can I help you today? Or if you'd like, you can call me toll free at this number. Now, when I was on my phone, I closed that out, and instantaneously it asked for my name and my phone number. I didn't go through it because I knew the end of the story, but she typed in her name and her phone number, and they immediately called her. And we know how the story ends, right? She allowed remote access. Who knows what they did? It's unlikely, right? They were only trying to get some money, but they flew by all her security and right into that machine by asking the user to log in. It all looked legit, and it was a typo domain. So I looked up geektechies.us. Anybody have any idea looking at the name servers bluehost.in? Yeah, so we got a tech support scam site here, and that's what she fell for. So now let's go back to what happened to me in the first, when I went to get the screenshots. Up pops up, install HP drivers. So this would also look as normal. If it's the second time an IP is going to this domain, this might pop up. Well, let's do a little research. All right, so we download that driver, we upload it to VirusTotal, and we get a 4 out of 69. And that was on 3.4. So this is also important about my talk. I want you to look at what's not there. If you use CrowdStrike, ESET, Dr. Web, or Malwarebytes, you're okay. But all those other antivirus programs looked at that and said, you're good. So if you're using any of those other products, if you don't have defense in depth, something else looking at this, you don't allow users to install drivers, right? We know all those things. Then that malware gets installed. So I take that, because it was only 4 out of whatever, 4 out of 69, 4 out of 89, and I upload it to Hybrid Analysis, a sandbox. A lot of us have sandboxes configured. And I say, all right, what is this thing? It looks at it and says, threat score of 100 out of 100. Oh, I'm guessing that's malware. I don't stop there because I like to know, what did the malware do? This is interesting to me because most of my talk is about domain names. It didn't use a domain name, it used an IP address. So now your DNS filtering is probably not going to do anything for you. You're looking at your firewall or filtering, and hopefully it looks at that 157 or 152 address and blocks it. It's port 80. So it's not secure. You ought to be able to look at that traffic. So if your firewall, if this happened in a corporate environment and you're doing monitoring, well, maybe you would have caught it, but I want you to go back to that VirusTotal page. If the product you're using to scan it wasn't one of those 4, you didn't catch it. So, what is that IP address configured? Maybe your firewall blocks that IP address. Well, using some web filtering software, right? It was insufficient content, but I want you to look down there at the bottom of category, low risk. So once again, it's flying by all your controls and getting to the user's machine. So how else are malicious actors getting past your secure email gateway or your gateways? Well, one thing is they'll send a phishing campaign that has a CAPTCHA. Very hard right now for your secure email gateway to do anything about a CAPTCHA. They look at it and they say it's a benign page. I can't get by it. The user can go ahead and visit it. The user understands CAPTCHAs, can handle it. What does that look like? Well, you know what a CAPTCHA looks like. Now, I'm waiting for all the secure email gateway vendors to finally go and start using AI to be able to get past the CAPTCHA page. So this would be my call out to you. You ask your secure email gateway software vendor, will you get past a CAPTCHA? What happens with a CAPTCHA? And if they say no, say there's products out there that will help you with that. Let's get that employed. CAPTCHA AI, 100% accuracy with reCAPTCHAs. All right. Let's talk about attachments. So I don't have a zoom in for this one. Wouldn't matter, they're awfully small. Here is a particular secure email gateway filtering software. Filters all of these extensions. Well, I want to point out two. One is HTML, and the other one isn't there. It's a JPEG image or a PNG. It's an image file. And I'm seeing these both used now regularly. From an HTML standpoint, how do the malicious actors get past that? Well, the attachment is base 64 encoded. The threat actors have the JavaScript decode it, obfuscate it, and they can use free tools to do that, and then it winds up on your endpoint. Now, I want you to think about this. The attachment is on your endpoint, and when they double-click it, it's running on the endpoint. It'll probably look on the left-hand side of your screen. This isn't out on the web yet. There's none of your other filtering. If the secure email gateway has failed here, it's sitting on your machine, and here's your credential harvesting page. Now, the one thing that has to happen with this credential harvesting page is when they type their username and password and click submit, it's got to go out to a website. But there's a couple of things. We've already seen websites are miscategorized all the time. And if that website happens to be categorized as finance, healthcare, shopping, those are all categories that you're not supposed to be decrypting. So you won't see the credential leave because laws preclude it. Oh, I should go back one. The one on the right, that's the images that we're starting to see come in, right? These, and boy, do our users jump on that, right? You just paid a bill. Thank you for your payment, right? All of these things as subjects. And then they ask for a phone call. A question I would ask you, here's something you can test with your EDR. Will your EDR block a legitimate remote access tool? Because that's what these bad guys are trying to do. That you get your user on the phone, hey, yep, I can take care of it, I just need to remote into your machine. Make sure you're real or whatever lie they come up with. So attachments, that's how they're flying by. All right, so let's talk about domain, your web filtering, and maybe your secure email gateway filtering. A best practice is to block newly observed domains and newly registered domains. If it's newly observed, so here, this particular product, newly registered domains block, default is alert. So you would have to say, I want this blocked. Domains that have been registered or had a change of ownership in the past 32 days. So now the bad guy has to look at, if I'm going to go after your organization with this domain, I got to register it 32 days before I want to use it. Or do they? Who in here knew you could rent a domain? 2, 3, 4 of you? 5? All right. I didn't know that. Like up until about 3 months ago, I had no idea that you could go out and rent a domain. Let's talk about what kind of domains you can rent. So I went out to look at it, like, I want to rent a domain. And are there any healthcare domains? And sure enough, there's some healthcare domains out there. One of them's yummyhealth.com. It's a little pricey, $833. But, you know, if you're making a million, the average healthcare payment for ransomware is $1 million. Yeah, $833, you might pay that. Another one, myhealthlab.com. That one's a little pricey, $139,751. They ain't selling that one. Another one, I like this one, allmyhealth.com, $101 a month. So there you go. You can rent the domain. But now the important part, right? We were just talking about newly observed and newly registered domains. How long ago was this registered? We go out to our who is data, and whoop, let me go back one. Our who is data, this thing was registered in 2004. It's 19 years old. And until I started doing this research, I would have given credence to a domain that's been around for a long time. I would have said, well, it's been around for 19 years, but I won't anymore. So you can rent the domain, it's been around for a while. But Joe, it's probably got a category of like domain parking, right? No, unfortunately. You take this domain, you stick it into one of the web filter categories, you find out what it's categorized, and it's categorized as health and wellness, and it's low risk. So now, for $100, I can rent a domain, it's categorized health and wellness. This is what the bad guys are doing, the bad guys and those freaking red teamers. All right, and here's a nice important part. Your SSL decryption's not going to help you here. Why? Because the best practice dictates that you decrypt all traffic except in sensitive categories, such as health, finance, government, military, and shopping. So if you're doing your SSL decryption, I just beat that. I just flew past it. All right, there was an entire talk. It was a great talk, Evading EDR by DLL Sideloading with C#. If you didn't get a chance to view it, right, all of the talks are recorded, so you might be able to go and look at that. There's other ways to evade EDR, right? There was a Microsoft signed driver. This was just a while ago. Malicious drivers usher in EDR killers, and you end up with ransomware. So your EDR is not like the end-all, be-all. There are ways around it. But if you're still using antiquated AV, like I'd say, you really got to get an EDR. All right, so we go back to earlier in the presentation where I said phishing is not just phishing. It's also, just running out onto the web and doing Google searches. So, story time. Here's a search that you can perform right now. Wisconsin Nursing Practitioner, it should be Wisconsin Practitioner Collaborative Practice Agreement, Wisconsin. This blew me away because this targeted Wisconsin. Now, I'm in healthcare, and if a employee of my organization did this search, it would be legit. It's work-related. They're trying to get some information about collaborative agreements. But the site that it's at is nrha.com. Now, as security practitioners, we might look at that and do a little bit more research. The average user, what are they going to look at NRHA? It's got a cowboy on it. Like, is that a health organization in Wyoming? What is it? The average user is not going to care. They're going to click on the link. But let's say we have a super user. Ooh, I should know what that is. They go out and they look. NRHA is the North American Reining Horse Association. Why is there a nursing collaborative agreement on the Reining Horse Association website? I don't know. Let's find out. So our super duper user is really good. They want to test that site before they go at it. So they run out and they say, hey, let's throw this into the web filter test. What does this site come up as? It comes up as sports, and I want you to look at the category low risk. All right, well, this is low risk. I should be able to go to this site. It's low risk. And it's what I'm looking for. So, again, important. The first time that this link is clicked using your IP address, clicked using Google as a refer, and clicked, this is going to be, we're going to go through this a bunch of times, clicked with an appropriate browser agent, this page appears. So your user says, all right, it all looks good. I'm going to click it. And what are they presented with? Hi, this is someone else. Hi, I'm looking to Nurse Practitioner Collaborative Practice Agreement in Wisconsin. Notice the grammar error. A friend of mine told me he had seen it on your forum. I will appreciate any help here. And the admin of the site says, here's a direct download link. Like, how awesome. I Google searched and found it. Now, when you go to click on that, we got this super duper user. They hover over the link like they've been trained in the 5-minute training they had at the beginning of the year. And they say, oh, it's a website, alphabets.pl. Now, I wouldn't expect them to know that's Poland. I say, that's kind of odd. A Wisconsin collaborative agreement In Poland? So let's take a look. Let's do our due diligence. What's that site categorized as? We take a look. It's categorized as personal sites and blogs, and once again, low risk. What are the odds you're blocking that? Maybe you are. Maybe you don't allow anybody to go to personal websites and blogs. Wonderful, good for you. But if you're not, it's low risk. They're going to get there. There it is. Alphabets PL, low risk. So our super duper user says, okay, before I download this, I'm going to take that domain and I'm going to stick it into VirusTotal. And they do that and they see this site's been around for a while, 3 years. 0 out of 71. It must be safe. VirusTotal can't be wrong. It's 0 out of 71. So our user is really, really smart, right? That was 0 out of 71. That was old data. I want the updated VirusTotal. So they click the little refresh button, and what do they see? 0 out of 90 when I did this on the 4th of March this year. It's got to be okay to go to that website. So they go ahead and go to that website, and they download something, and amazingly, this is incredible, the file they download has exactly the words in it that they need. Nurse Practitioner Collaborative Agreement, Wisconsin. .zip. This is awesome. But we've got this super duper user that's just not going to take that as what they want. They're going to upload that to VirusTotal. So let's upload it to VirusTotal. Oh my God. There's 3 detections. But again, I want you to look at what's not there. There are 3 detections. If you're not using Google ESETNOD or Icarus, right? Your product didn't catch this. And if the user really wants this bad, they're going to say, well, that's probably a false positive. There are 87 that say it's okay. So we download it and we extract it. And you and I look at that. The first thing we do is we review over to the right, and oh, it's a .js file, and we're done. Like, that's nothing that I want. But our user doesn't, right? Our user doesn't even know what a JS file is. They're going to double-click that JS file. And the minute that they double-click, well, no, they're really, really smart, right? We're dealing with the incredible user. They're going to say, let's take that JS file and let's upload it. And it's been downgraded from 3 out of 59 to 2 out of 59. Woo-hoo! The JS, it must have been something in the zip file that was bad. Now they're going to say, okay, let's run it. And at that point in time, you better hope your EDR is working, because this flew by all of your security mechanisms down to the endpoint. And if your EDR doesn't look at this, and what you're going to see here in a little bit, your EDR should say this is bad. But if it misses it, or if it gets disabled some way, shape, or form, you're out of luck. So I took that JS file and I uploaded it, and it didn't say it was malicious. This is interesting, right? The earlier one I said 100% out of 100, but this one is 35 out of 100. It's suspicious. And as a threat hunter, I want to say, well, why was it suspicious? I always go to, what did it do? Well, that JS file was run by WScript. And that WScript, well, I can go back, but the WScript, it was going to reach out to a website, download a downloader, and infect the machine. So never, ever, ever, and this is why the EDR should have caught it, never, ever, ever should someone download something from the web, and then it gets executed by WScript, and then it reaches back out to the web. That ain't normal. So any EDR worth its salt should block that. But if you don't have an EDR, or your EDR failed in some way, shape, or form, right? At this point, you're going to get infected. So now I want to talk about that happens, and as the threat hunter investigator, I want to look into it. I extract the domain name, the URL, to go see what was this website, where was it? And I just go directly to it. And when I do that, I'm actually provided a different website with the Nurse Practitioner Collaborative Agreement. So one of 2 things as a threat hunter that's never been through this, you're going to think is it's been cleaned up. And you're probably not going to contact that website and say you've got malware there. Or you're going to submit that URL to your secure email gateway or your web filter company, and they're going to look at it, and they're going to say it looks normal to us. We went to that URL, and it's fine. Now, what the bad guys are doing is they're saying if someone goes to that URL a second time from the same IP, show them a different page. If someone goes to that URL and the refer is not Google, meaning they didn't get to it using a search engine, it's a threat hunter, show them a different page. So it makes our job harder in finding these things because I have to look at what the user did and then I have to emulate it perfectly. Now, if you're interested in finding some more of this type of malware, you can search for Colorado nurse practitioner agreement. Now, I want you to notice where this one is. In Iran, right? I hope you don't download, unless you're an investigator, right? You don't want to go downloading that one. But it's out there. Now, what attack have you just seen? That's a bootloader attack. And the JavaScript-based infection framework for bootloader rat increasingly delivers a wide variety of malware, including ransomware. That's as easy as it happens. The user doing everything legit, your software applications not being, not filtering properly, right? Your SSL decryption, not seeing the SSL decryption, your antivirus not catching it, your inline antivirus not catching it, and if your EDR doesn't catch it, then that's how, when you hear about organizations that have been ransomwared, that's how it can happen. A simple Google search. All right, so that you know, I first sent, so the filtering software that I said was missing this, I said, you know, it would be good for me to let them know that they missed it. So I shot them off an email and said, this website is malicious. It's got malware on it. And I got a response back, we're not changing it. And then I was like, all right, so they don't know how to analyze it. So I sent them a new email. If you go to this IP address the first time using, but you have to find it through Google, and this is how you do that, and you probably need a browser agent of this, then it will show you this page, which has a malicious download. Now, I don't know if they were lazy or if they just didn't want to do it. The next email was, send us a copy of the malware. So I had it, so I sent them a copy of the malware, and here you go. They went ahead and recategorized it as malware. So I did the right thing, and I said, all right, their product's not working right, let's get it fixed. So how might you, as a security practitioner, help out your secure email gateway filtering and your web filtering? Well, there's a product out there on GitHub called DNS Twister. It might, is it, Mark, do you know, is it built into Kali? Okay, it might be built into Kali. But what DNS Twister will do is you can feed it a domain and it will find all of the iterations, like I showed you all of the false banking sites. It'll tell you all those iterations. It'll find out if that domain name has been categorized. Here's an important part. It'll tell you whether there's an MX record. So if there's a phishing site that uses email, you can tell your secure email gateway, block all that crap. And if you're like me and you don't like downloading and installing stuff, there are a couple of websites. So here's DNS Twister at the command line, and a Linux Kali box. There's a couple of websites that will do it for you. Here's dnstwist.it. You can just put in the domain name. And here's dnstwister.report, the one I like. And why do I like it? Because it's got this export CSV value. So you can go stick in a domain, and you can say, find me all the iterations, and then you can export that to CSV. The next thing you would do is feed that into your secure email gateway or your vendor firewall and find out what are all these categorized as. And if they're not categorized as phishing or malware or whatever, right, then you would say, okay, I'm going to have them all recategorized, and you're going to make you and everybody that uses your product more safe. So, do GE Healthcare sometime well, all right, here's, is this the fake one? Yeah, here's GE Healthcare improperly configured in this site telling you how it's going to be tested, and it would just come back as, a health and wellness site that needs to be recategorized. You can automate the process. So you can take all those URLs and you can write a script that you can stick into, like on a Palo Alto, you would do a test URL and the domain name, and it'll spit back what all this stuff is categorized. So if any of you are using Palo Altos, you can do that. What I would recommend, so I would script the domain. So I am scripting all of the domains that I find are important to us. So all of my organization's own domains, all of the organizations like me that we do business with, their domains. I go into my firewall and I say, dump everything that was a financial organization or health and wellness or shopping or I don't really worry about mills and govs because they can't be faked that easy. And get me all those domains. And then I feed that into my IOCs filter, which tells me what they're categorized as. That provides me with an Excel spreadsheet that I can say, don't show me anything that I'm already blocking, show me all the other stuff. And I literally block hundreds of domains a week. Unfortunately, this can take some time. It's easy when you have something like GE Healthcare or Commerce Bank. It's much harder when you have these weird domains like BC, how does that go? BCBSIL.com. Anybody happen to know what BCBSIL.com is? That's Blue Cross Blue Shield, Illinois. Well, they love to fake those sites because people make typos all the time. And so that BCBSIL, and there's probably other states that are using them, that's one of those that you're going to get all kinds of legitimate domains that begin with BCB. So you have to view them and say, all right, that's legit. And that's why I recommend your script ignores legit websites that look like they're spoofed, but they're not. They're spoof-ished domains. Then you don't have to re-review them every week. Start with your domains. I would highly recommend you look at your vendor domains and then add your special domains. And if you think this looks like a lot of work, it's a lot of work. I like do 10,000 domains. Like when I get my spoof domain list, it's in the 10,000 range. Luckily, there's nothing you can do. Like, how do you eat the elephant? Anybody? Thank you very much, right? So one bite at a time. You eat the elephant one bite at a time. So I wouldn't recommend starting with all of your domains because you're going to end up like me. You got 10,000 things to fix. And I can't turn off. A lot of you are probably like that. Just can't turn off. Like, yeah, commercial. Maybe I can go down and refilter some domains. So add your special domains and then look at businesses and others, right? You may have some ideas that I don't have. And the last thing I want to talk about is when you have a compromise in a layer of security, but you didn't have a breach, you really need to start looking at every single layer that it got by and find out why it got by that and fix that layer, or you're eventually going to be nailed. This is why we have defense in depth. And if you're just saying, oh, my defense in depth worked, I'm good, you're making a mistake. So I don't have a checklist for you here, but if you Google post-mortem checklist, I highly recommend that you do that. Okay, it got through these 5 layers of security. It's at this layer of security. Why did it get by these 5? And then look at what can we do to fix it. I think you're going to find, like I did, it all starts with DNS, or 90% of the time it starts with DNS. So if you can fix up DNS, you're probably better off. And that's what I have. Thank you. Are there any questions? Everybody waiting for final announcements. I did pretty good, 45 minutes. Thank you, CypherCon. Have a good day. I will do that. There you go. If you're in education, if you're an instructor, this would be a really easy, if I was still teaching, this is absolutely a project I would do. I would say, now here's the problem. You can't do it with an EDU site because you can't really fake an EDU site. Yeah, that's a special site like .gov and like .mil. But you could go to organizations in your area and say, just start with them. And then if they're willing to tell you what firewall they're using, again, this is for education, if they're willing to tell you what firewall they're using, you could go find out what website will tell you what those things are filtered as, and you could provide them with a report. And if there's a free method, a lot of these filtering software websites will provide a location where you can request recategorization. You could do it all for the business, and you could provide Incredible value to your students because now they know how to do this, and incredible value to the local businesses that you're helping out. So if you're an instructor, think about that. Easy things to do. All right, thank you.